So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with the Incredible Hulk. So let's start the series. It would be an understatement to say that the Hulk's approach to missions is unconventional. Many people are still baffled by how he obtained them, let alone finished them. However, if anyone attempts to follow his example, they risk being imprisoned or accused of treason against the village. Sadly, the teen lived a sheltered life and had everything handed down to him, so he never understood the pain of being a peasant. He is always accompanied by a small army of samurais, so not many were stupid enough to cross his path. This story is just one of many Hulk's misdeeds involving the daimyo and his son. It all starts when the prince decides to visit the village for his regular tour. The village leader had to worry about Naruto's other self, even though he wasn't the main problem. Both were unpredictable and equally troublesome, but the Hulk only brought up the matter more than once. For safety reasons, he had Team 7 assigned to a delivery mission outside of the village. This was because the Hokage knew it was best to keep his grandson figure busy and away from the village to ensure the two never met. Everything proceeded according to plan until Naruto was taken and Team 7 was ambushed. The shinobi commands, "Surrender now or I will gut him like a fish." To his astonishment, though, none of the members of Team 7 appeared concerned. In fact, they were casual about it. The pink-haired one remarks, "Oh man, it's Naruto again," upon observing her teammate's condition. "A dope is always a dope," adds the team's lone Uchiha. "Shut it, team." Despite being captured by the enemy, the blonde returned it right away. "What the devil is happening here? What's the matter with this group? This is undoubtedly the most peculiar hostage and capture scenario they have ever come across." They recognized the iconic Ika Ika series and realized it was porn because even the famous copy ninja Kakashi was reading his porn with a slack look. The Jonin of Team 7 also contributed his own comment, although it was more of a lecture. "Naruto, how many times do I have to tell you to mind your surroundings?" As if things weren't strange enough, the genin who was captured at knife point casually carried on the conversation. "Sorry Kakashi-sensei, I was distracted. I have this nagging feeling I am missing something important. I'm still trying to figure out what it was." He's speaking as if his life doesn't depend on it now. As if this were a training exercise, he concluded the discussion by saying, "Don't worry, I will get out of this in no time." There, both sides silently and humorously watch him attempt to free himself from the taijutsu hold. Few people are able to free a Jonin's lock, much less a genin's. In addition to the captain, his team also includes two chunins who wonder if the hostage they are holding is somehow mentally ill. Meanwhile, they watch the odd teenager wriggle and twist, but regrettably, they are unable to free him from his situation. However, Kakashi had his own thoughts as well, wondering why the Hulk hadn't appeared this time. Usually, the giant would show up, take care of everything, and kick everyone's butt. After considering the entire situation, he came to the conclusion that the enemy was only trying to capture his student and not set off his primal instinct. This made more sense to him as he thought back on all of their prior encounters. They have developed an internal tag team relationship that is similar to wrestling. When Naruto found himself in over his head, he would let his other half take over. Naruto has long since learned and accepted his other self as another helpful ability that only he can use. It is true that after he had exhausted all of his options, he sighed and allowed his other self to take over. He can at least partially control his transformation thanks to his training, which not many people knew, but his concept of control is a little nebulous or unclear because all he could do was trigger it. All he needed was a little concentration, after which he would have no control at all. It's no different from a bloodline. His captor discovered him in a strange silence at that point, mistaking his closed eyelids for the genin's eventual surrender. Regretfully, that's when his world begins to move, earthquake. They had heard of them, but not in fire country. His first instinct was to grab hold of the closest stable element, which also happens to be the source of his problem, although he was unaware of this. His world grew slowly but steadily, and his perspective rose above those below him. While he was unaware of what was going on, his team witnessed everything, and they watched as their captain held on as the genin grew like an akimichi. Of course, this one isn't an akimichi because it's green and appears to be quite menacing, but none of them dared to move or make any noise. As usual, the Hulk is completely clueless after completing his transformation. He saw something moving on his back and grabbed the ninja as if he were magically fishing him out of his back. After a quick glance at him, he realized that he was not getting any action from this. The ninja didn't try to attack, so he lost interest and dumped him in front of Team 7. The ninja was clearly still shocked when he finally saw the thing in full view. Clearly not all ninjas can handle the surprise well. The swamp thing is green, but it's impossible to know what's going through the ninja's mind. Since the ninja is already frantic, the rest of Team 7 doesn't need to do anything. Perhaps he had some sort of fears about Bogeyman or other legendary creatures. Another odd scene occurs when the Hulk approaches the other Chunins. At least to our green friend, it's odd. It's true that the two Chunins remained motionless like statues, but only their eyes were moving, so they were tracking the giant's movements. When he discovers that strange, our giant friend decides to test his theory by taking a few steps to the left and then right. He was proud of himself, but it was only amusing and interesting the first few times. After a while, it gets old, so he smacks their heads together, knocking them out. He then dumps them in front of Team 7, which is on top of the other unfortunate ninja, knocking him out in the process. For Team 7, it's just another odd day with a side mission. Alright, team. Unfortunately, the Hulk took off and vanished into one of his super leaps before Kakashi could finish his next lesson. His remaining students stared at him and their vanishing teammate in another awkward silence, but Kakashi didn't have to turn around to realize he was long gone because his plus-size students have a habit of vanishing occasionally, and each time he does, he creates a draft. Telling Naruto off would be useless because it wouldn't apply to his other self. It's obvious that the two had very different personalities, and at times he even sees them as two different beings. The Jonin feels foolish because his bulky student shows him so little respect. However, it's difficult to have authority over someone who is so much bigger and stronger than you. He sighs in defeat and rubs his head once more in preparation for another migraine that is on the horizon. He is aware that the true purpose of this mission is to remove his oversized pupil from the village, but based on the direction he vanished in, there is no mistaking his destination. Naruto did mention that he had forgotten something, and maybe his giant self knew what it was. Though he will leave the mechanics and theories to the brainiacs, scientists, he knew that occasionally when the Hulk was given specific instructions, Naruto could recall bits and pieces but not all. The time he spent with the two, Naruto and Hulk, made him realize that both can be considered as two very separate entities. The Jonin can only report what he sees because thinking about it isn't Kakashi's forte and the science jargon is more of Orochimaru's specialty. He gives the command for his dysfunctional crew to get ready to return to the hamlet while he lets out another concealed sigh. Sensei. What about the delivery mission? He goes on to say, forget the mission, the purpose of it was to get Naruto out of the village. Apparently the daimyo's sons coming for a visit, and for safety reasons the Hokage was hoping for the two to steer well clear of each other. Since there were not many rumors and gossips about the prince, Sakura is also aware of the issue. Sensei, shouldn't we hurry back now? I think with Naruto in his current state he would bash first then be done with it. She is already able to visualize the situation and the prince's current condition. During her time with the Hulk, she discovered that everything he did was always extreme. The only time he was able to show some restraint was when he was around small children. Ninjas, on the other hand, are a different story because they frequently bump into him, knocking themselves out without the Hulk doing anything. Unfortunately, the young ninja maiden cannot handle the Hulk's cruelty when he is furious. Once, he made a pretzel out of a poor ninja, and she was present when they took him to the hospital. They spent hours attempting to repair the damage. The ninja woke up, frightening everyone in the room, as if to add to the nightmare. His cries of panic aren't helping either, as he finally recognizes his own state. "Fix me, please, I will do anything, I will give you anything." Anko was only slightly depressed as a result of them taking him to the interrogation, even though it was obviously unnecessary. However, some doctors were more interested in how he was still alive, which caused the poor ninja to cry even more. Normally, the human body shouldn't bend this way, and the ninja could even see his buttocks as his arms and legs sprang into different positions. It appeared as though he had been intentionally disassembled, torn apart, and then sewn back together incorrectly. The last Uchiha felt the same way, and while he might be interested in gaining more authority to murder his brother, he would never consider upsetting the Fire Lord to do so. As clan children, they were taught the value of maintaining harmony with the daimyo, and at the very least, one should not annoy the person who provides for them. Unfortunately, Team 7 as a whole might face punishment if Naruto actually beats up the prince. Sasuke didn't want to be linked to the incident because it would negatively affect his clan's reputation. Like Sakura, he also believed that nothing positive would come of the two of them meeting. Despite their teammates' lack of ninja skill, Naruto always does unexpected things, so you never know what he might do next. As soon as they secure their prisoners, Kakashi calls Pakken to inform the Hokage and Umbuz of their predicament. Unfortunately, they know it's too late because, no matter how hard they try, the inevitable will happen. The Hokage's plan to stop their meeting was a good example. As for Naruto and the Hulk, things will always or eventually come to an end. The rest of Team 7 will have a lot to catch up on as the object of their new mission has an unfair advantage of flying back to their home village. They had previously ridden on their teammates' back, which is like riding a roller coaster. As hectic as it was, it definitely cuts down on travel time, so they wouldn't be surprised if he's already in the village by now. Their only hope is to either postpone their meeting or at least change one of their routes. The entire Umbuz force was sent to search for either of them by the time the news reached the Hokage Tower. Naturally, the locals noticed their actions, and it has been a long time since the village had taken such action. Aside from the Hyuga incident, it's either the village is being attacked or the Hulk is returning. Most people correctly assumed that it's the latter because the Umbuz would have been more lenient if it had been an invasion. The news of the Fire Lord's son's arrival today was another. Most of them knew that the two would ultimately collide, it was just a question of when. Some even had bets on whether or not he would be able to make the prince see reason. Fire Country's royal family is the most likely victim or party involved, so this time it's no different. Over the years, they have heard about his extraordinary activities from everyday events, the academy, and missions. Just when they think they've seen it all, something else happens and blows their minds away. The prince is the obvious target, but it's unclear what he would do to him. In addition, there's the subject of his potential punishment, with some wondering if they would think about locking him away. As usual, they knew he would get himself into trouble, so they didn't wager on that. They can send him to prison, but he will hop over to Konoha to pick up his ramen and then back. At first, they probably wouldn't know about it because he can cover a lot of distance with a few leaps, but they will probably find out when they eventually find his empty ramen bowls. When they do, they will realize there isn't much they can do about it. Most people would just roll their eyes because there isn't a cell that can hold the Hulk. However, he would cause more trouble than he was worth. Based on his actions in Konoha, the Hulk would probably accidentally destroy their jail. Even a single sneeze would blow through multiple walls and blow their cell door. Not to mention that he could knock down any wall by simply leaning against it. They can picture the hilarious situation in the jail canteen when he begs for ramen. This is the usual rumor on the streets of Konoha, where everyone talks about what they believe will occur. Nobody is willing to wager that the two will collide because they know it's inevitable. Few had also heard that the Hokage was attempting to keep the two apart by sending Team 7 on a delivery mission, but someone said they saw the Hulk flying over the village, undoubtedly using one of his super frog jumps. The villagers are accustomed to it because they know that trouble always follows the Hulk, so they don't have much doubt that the two will eventually clash. The prince is well known in the village, but not in a positive way. He has a reputation for troubling residents who complain about the quality of their supplies. He says he is visiting a ninja hamlet, but his activities seem more like an inspection, and no one dares to disagree with him in the hopes of keeping his favor. I know some people you can hire from the capitals. A little bland, you should add a little more sweetness into it. No one's going by that, you need to think a little outside the box. He spoke as like he was an authority, telling everyone what he believed they need to do. He even went so far as to tell a ninja weapon shop owner what he believes a true weapon should look like, saying that it must be shiny and well presented to attract better buyers. Unfortunately, there were some ass-kissers who praised him for whatever advice he gave, which only serves to motivate him further as he went all out to demonstrate his superior knowledge. The poor man could only scowl inwardly as he thanked the prince respectfully, not wanting to reveal the truth because no one dared to tell him otherwise. The seller glanced at his samurai guards and saw that they were not looking him in the eye. As for the young man, he was there to engage with the locals because he had learned from his father that the best way to get to know the people is to engage with them. He recalled how his father had aided his subjects and how they were grateful to him for it, so he is attempting to do the same with the ninja village since he will eventually be their leader. Unfortunately, his plan had a number of problems. His father didn't give orders, he only did so when he was asked for them. When giving wisdom, there are situations in which it is beneficial and situations in which it is not. At the very least, he should try to understand the locals before imposing his ideas on them. If he hadn't been the prince, most people would have ignored him or expelled him from their establishments. The Hulk is also in the village, and as we speak, he is with a young girl as they are about to turn into the main, busy streets. The villagers learned to keep a safe distance from him because none of them wanted to risk being trampled by him, and no matter how cautious he is, unless you are a child, there's always a chance he didn't see you. However, if you look closely, you'll see that the little girl is actually leading him today. She had her arm around his index finger as she half-dragged him from one vendor to another. It appears that today is her birthday, and somehow she persuaded him to go shopping with her. As usual, our green friend couldn't refuse, even though he didn't understand a word. He only knew the words, here, tomorrow, and promise, which is how he ended up in front of her house. The parents knew he was there because of the little tremor he makes when he lands, but their little girl had been waiting by the window the entire time, so they knew it was him without even knocking. "He's here, he's really here," their young princess exclaims with joy and excitement. Since she had been talking about today's event non-stop since yesterday, her parents were relieved that he kept his word, even though they would have been concerned if she had been older because they could never threaten the Hulk. She told them her big news without waiting for their question. "Mama, Papa, guess what?" she said. "I got Naruto to take me shopping tomorrow." It would be an understatement to say that they were astonished and concerned, but not for the reasons one might anticipate. The worried mother asks, "Dear, which Naruto exactly did you talk to?" She clarified, "Big Naruto or the normal Naruto." The locals would occasionally mix up their names, referring to him as Hulk Naruto or simply Hulk when they wanted to be more precise. "Big Naruto," she exclaimed, a nickname that young children frequently use, and she was pretty pleased with herself at the time. The large gentleman could sleep through everything unless they are in grave danger because he is usually sleeping, so none of her pals could attract his attention. Nevertheless, she somehow got him to pay attention and listen to her, which is why she is so proud of herself. Unfortunately, her parents were very concerned about that. Sweetie, you do know Big Naruto is very difficult to talk to." As it happens, they were more worried about how he would let their princess down than they were scared of him. Just so you know, many adults had tried but less a handful were ever successful, but their daughter didn't agree. "No, I made sure to use very small words," she continued, and he promised, as though that clarified her confidence. "Naruto and I always says he would never break a promise because it's his ninja way. When little Naruto is brought up, it hurts them to think of how they used to treat him." "Alright, we believe you, but remember Naruto-kun is a ninja, so he's very busy. Just don't put too much hope into it in case he didn't show up. He's could be called in any time by the Hokage or his sensei for emergency missions. They don't want her to have high expectations in case Naruto and the Hulk don't show up." Fortunately, their daughter shook her tiny head in understanding, but it didn't lessen her joy. The two adults can only sigh and hope they will be there because tomorrow is her birthday. They were a little concerned when he failed to show up at the scheduled time, but they were thrilled that he took some time off for their little girl when he did. As the father opens the door, he asks, "You are here for Rinnie?" Hulk promised. The father grinned uncontrollably. "She's been waiting for you." He's right, despite the Hulk's enormous size, it's rather cute to see their young daughter dragging him along. Rinnie is already excited to get her day started after nearly flying out of the house to him. When the wife innocently asks, "You think he will become her boyfriend?" her husband gives her a frightened expression. "Honey, don't ever joke about that. I don't even know what do with the regular ones, let alone the Hulk. I wouldn't be able to scare him with my mean father look. If it's a regular one, perhaps you can hire Naruto to give them the mean stare." When the wife noticed her husband considering the proposal, she burst out laughing. "What? I thought it's a good idea. The Hulk would undoubtedly frighten the living daylights out of any prospective boyfriend. Come on, dear, we are wasting daylight, let us set up our surprise for Rinnie." The fact that people have grown so trusting of the Hulk may surprise some. Most people believe he is just a big softy, especially when it comes to kids, and they have seen enough of him around kids to know he poses no threat to them. Some even see him teaching kids how to play nicely. Children naturally quarrel when they play, and the Hulk would call their attention by lightly hitting the ground between them. "No fight," he orders. He explains that Hulk no like fight, while nudging the two together. Children can't always make up, therefore it could take some time. "You fight," Hulk's sad, he said, glaring at them. The Hulk would eventually persuade them to put aside their differences, but he would still push them together until they gave each other an awkward hug before leaving alone. When it was all over, one of them asked, "Wanna play together?" and the other nodded. Since other kids were watching, they obviously didn't want to get into such an awkward situation, so they behaved appropriately. People who watched the show chuckled and said he was naturally good with children. Others said he had a big influence on them because of this one incident. In any case, people enjoyed what they saw, so he occasionally worked as a nanny for them. Since there is always plenty of room around him wherever he goes, Rinny wants the Hulk to go with her. Of course, because of his size, the villagers would naturally avoid getting in his way because everyone is afraid of being crushed or trampled by the giant when he falls. But they can't forget the one foolish ninja who was flattened by the Hulk because he was hiding in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, aside from ramen, some people believe he has sixth sense when it comes to children. Over the years, there have been a few casualties, and the hospital even has special codes for those incidents, which they essentially divide into Hulk accidents and Hulk incidents. As a result, the villagers knew better than to get in his way unless you were a child. Those who watched Dr. House would likely understand this joke as I portrait their counterpart in the Naruto world. Technically, they were the same because both were treated as emergencies. Unfortunately, the latter was deemed a lost cause until a special team was formed. This team is a special unit that specializes in handling the odd treatments and unforeseeable diagnoses. The incident that Sakura brought up was indeed one of those extreme examples. The team was formed since it's impossible to predict what the Hulk could do to regular humans. Hulk accidents typically involve minor mishaps like falling lampposts and walls or even bumping into the Hulk, but Hulk incidents are vicious and typically involve an enraged Hulk. History demonstrates that this could have unanticipated and regrettable outcomes. It could frighten anyone if the operation happens to be adjacent to the morgue, which could result in a serious room allocation error, or it could have been there as planned. It hasn't been used yet, but those coming in under Hulk incidents have been close. The hospital director responded that it was a coincidence when asked, but fortunately the special medical team was ideal for such an incident as they managed to fix every patient that came in. While not all of them are in one piece, at least they are still alive for the interrogation. In any case, returning to the Hulk and the young girl, they all thought the same thing: they are so adorable. This is another uncommon sight in Konoha, as the last time they saw something like this was the Hulk wearing a crown of flowers. This time, however, it's a small little girl who leads and pulls him everywhere she goes. Some gave her complimentary food for the presentation just for that spectacle. An elderly woman from the sweet shop asks, "Oh, my goodness, how did you get the big guy to come along with you?" The young girl responds, "I asked him and he promised Rinny," as if it were a truth. "Wow, that's very clever of you, I don't think anyone had ever done that." The young girl gratefully accepts the woman's offer of, "How would you like some sweets," and thanks her. The Hulk followed along even if he didn't fully comprehend. Like his small companion, he also gained something. One threw him an apple and said, "Hey, Naruto, catch." It's a token of appreciation for stopping his fruit cart from running away. Rinny gathers a small bag of treats as they continue down the shopping district. It's similar to trick-or-treating Halloween, except that she gets all the treats. By this point, she is holding an ice cream in one hand and a small bag of treats hanging on the other arm. She wraps the bag around the Hulk's index finger on the other arm and drags him to another store that piques her interest. It's the best birthday she's ever had, and she's obviously very happy because she gets compliments and occasionally treats everywhere she goes. She wonders if her day can get any better because the Hulk is here to protect her and make her time in the shopping district less oppressive. Normally, the street would be so crowded that she can hardly see anything, but with her big Naruto around, she can have all the spaces she needs. Unfortunately, all of that came to an end when she bumped with the Fire Lord's son, knocking her to the ground and causing her sweets to spill all over the place. She even lost her ice cream. Of course, ice cream and a spoiled prince only lead to one thing. Look what you have done, you little shit, it's ruined, it's dirty. She obviously prefers her ice cream to his expensive clothes. It's not surprising that the prince missed him, but his guards didn't, so nobody could stop him from what he was about to do. The teenager was more preoccupied with his ruined clothes and the object of his annoyance than he was with the Hulk, who from that distance would have been mistaken for a huge green wall in the background. Similar to Konoha's side, they also learn of the impending catastrophe a bit too late, which is how everyone ended up watching the drama unfold in slow motion. At this point, only the prince and the young girl are the main characters, while the Hulk watched from the sidelines in an attempt to gauge the current state of affairs. The pampered prince continues to talk about his ruined clothes, saying, "You see this, you see what you have done." The young child was clearly distressed because she had a few tears in her eyes. She was concerned over losing her ice cream, but this frightening teenager was not making things easier for her. He was initially unsure of how to console his young companion, but as he saw the child's growing distress, it gradually became clear that those with sharp eyes could see the changes in the Hulk and knew what was going to happen. Even though he was only a little child, the prince's rage overcame him. He came to Konoha to demonstrate his greatness, leadership, wisdom, and insights, but one foolish brat spoiled it all. He is now a laughingstock to the very people he intends to lead in the future, and because he wants retribution, revenge, and for the foolish child to learn to accept responsibility, he grabs her by the hair and yanks her to demonstrate what she did. After all, it is only right that those who have wronged someone make amends, isn't it? When our large friend expresses his displeasure, chaos breaks out. In an attempt to shield his friend, he pushed him aside, but regrettably, this action sent the prince flying and smashing through the glass window display. The samurai had to act even though they didn't want to fight, so they unsheathed their swords. Evidently, the Hulk was drawn to their behavior because he turned to face them as well. Fortunately, the Umbus and Shinobis show up before the situation can get much worse, but they chose to focus on them rather than engage in combat with the samurais. Saying, "Stop, put your swords away," the Umbusa's captain, the samurai leader narrowed his gaze and turned to face the shinobi. "Can't do that, shinobi, this thing attacked our lord, it's our duty to bring him in." It's obvious that they haven't considered how they will engage in combat and bring him in. "Please stand down, samurai, you are in Konoha now, please let us handle this." As a matter of fact, our Hokage is on his way, he will personally take responsibility and answer to the Fire Lord. The Umbu uses the prince's movement, which he can see and hear, to negotiate. "I suggest you see to the prince and make sure he's not hurt in any other way." The Umbu was correct that the prince's welfare should come first. They realized that they were all essentially in the same boat. The ninja village will suffer punishment because the incident took place inside their walls, while the samurais will also suffer punishment for their failure to fulfill their role as the prince's guards. If the Hokage is prepared to accept responsibility and is able to negotiate his way out, then perhaps it will be better for everyone. They may talk big, but none of them had ever faced anything this large. The majority of them were trained to fight ninjas or missing means, but not this thing. Only now did the samurai captain question whether they could actually take on the big guy. Maybe the shinobis did them a favor by breaking up the fight. As the samurai captain continues to look around, he notices that Umbus and other ninjas are attempting to calm and restrain the giant. Of course, none of them were physically attempting to restrain him, rather, they were attempting to persuade him to stand down. The Hulk exclaims, "Rinny, hurt," as he attempts to justify his rage. Umbu Hare says, "Rinny's okay, Hare took her home." When the Hulk sees the prince leave the scene, he grunts. The teenager also didn't keep quiet about it. "Just you wait, you monster, I will have my father execute you. He will burn your village to the ground." The Hulk clearly wanted to follow, but the Umbu held him back as they shook their heads. He clearly saw the ninja's reaction and blamed them for not doing anything to assist him, but his guard and shinobi swiftly removed him from the area. "It's okay, Naruto, the Umbus will take care of it." They want to reassure him that everything has already been handled by the ninjas, which is standard procedure because they handle the majority of the village's tasks. However, the Hulk remembers that there are still some samurais, so he gestures toward them as though to inquire, "What about them?" which the ninjas understand. "It's alright, no one's fighting, see, no swords." By this point, Umbus and shinobi have surrounded the giant. They were careful not to make it too obvious or uncomfortable for him because they knew he was agitated. Rather than boxing him in, they were there to make sure nothing irritated him because they don't want someone to try to start a fight. As a result, the samurai captain saw the strange scene while trying to figure out what they were dealing with. From what he could see, the giant wanted to fight but was stopped by all of the ninjas present. After listening to their conversation, the ninjas made sure that everything was taken care of so the big guy wouldn't have to get involved. Later, he was shocked to see so many ninjas gathered. As far as he can tell, almost every clan was present, including the Akimikis, Hyugas, Inazukas, and Aburames. The Hyugas served as lookouts, scanning the area with their eyes to make sure no one was trying anything amusing. The Inazukas also behaved ferociously, as if they were trying to detect an impending attack. The atmosphere is akin to another shinobi war, and he had the strangest feeling that the ninjas were targeting them. At that moment, he realized how serious the situation was. Obviously, something was happening, and they just so happened to be in the middle of it. He's relieved that he and his men didn't start anything. According to the samurai's philosophy, the ninjas were ready to leap on them if the negotiation went awry. It seems to be for everyone's benefit because if a fight breaks out, nobody can predict what will happen. However, the last thing they want is for the Hulk to lose it again, so the only way to avoid this situation is to remove the least problematic element first and apologize later. The Umbu removed the young child from the midst of all of this, but not before assuring the Hulk that she would be safe. They had discovered how protective he is, so they knew exactly what had happened when they arrived at the scene. Regretfully, even though the Hulk was not at fault, they still had to think about the consequences, so they attempted to limit the damage. "It's alright, we will take you back to your parents, sorry about your birthday, I am sure Naruto will make it up to you." Despite her advanced age, Rinny is not a moron. Having witnessed everything that transpired, she believed she was solely to blame. However, she realized that the royalty they had crossed meant that the worst-case scenario would be that she would never see her companion again. Fortunately, the Umbu understood her concern and felt sorry for her. "The Hokage will fix everything, you know he sees Naruto like a grandson figure, he even allowed him to call him old man." She smiled at her response because she had heard some of the stories herself. "Don't worry about the big guy, you should know he can take care of himself." Unfortunately, her day didn't go as planned despite all of her family's efforts. She still worries that she won't see her giant friend again, even though she knows that bringing him along was selfish and only made her feelings worse. At least her father was able to console her by telling her that Giant Naruto did what he wanted even if she hadn't brought him along. Giant Naruto would have beat up the prince anyway. When he hears him bullying you, you know he has some kind of sixth sense for that. In fact, had you not took him along, he might come crashing down on top of him, which I think would be very bad for both sides. Her father is correct, that would undoubtedly occur. Both Naruto and the Hulk would do whatever it took to defend the village in the event of an attack. As small Naruto frequently claims, it's his ninja way. Her father is correct, both Giant Naruto and small Naruto have the heart of a ninja, even though few can see that he is Hokage material. Returning to the commercial district, the Hokage eventually makes it to the situation. After being briefed, he realizes that even though Naruto did the right thing, the issue persists, which is why he is sighing now as he speaks to his enormous grandson figure. Naruto, we have a mission, let's go and see the fire daimyo, Rinne. He obviously didn't want to go just yet. Knowing that Rinne was one of the children lingering around him, the Hokage looked at him empathetically. He was already aware of the main events based on the condensed briefing report. Rinne is alright, Naruto. Umbu Hair took her home. The only information the Hokage needed to summarize the situation was the damage report and the individuals involved. At least he knew that Konoha was not solely to blame. The only thing left to decide was how to present it to the Fire Lord. It's not like he can simply place all the blame on the prince and expect the man to accept it. Come on Naruto, the quicker we finish this the quicker you can return to see her. The Hulk is still hesitant because he senses that this journey will be lengthy. Naruto, how about I promise you ramen once we get there? Despite the promise of ramen, his unusual response made the other ninjas smile since he still didn't want to abandon his small friend. The Hulk only appeared because the Hokage persisted and promised him all the ramen he could eat. Fortunately, the medical staff arrived by that time to inform him that the prince was okay and that he would be fine despite the minor concussion and minor bruises he had sustained. The only issue now is getting him and the Hulk to Fire Capital. The Hokage divides the group in two for safety reasons. He will go with Naruto and leave right away, leaving the prince to be treated and then follow. Little did they know that the prince also demanded to leave and asked to be sent in this manner, requesting to be Hiration, because he knew the previous Hokage's guards could do it. The prince didn't want the old ninja to try to trivialize the situation and blame him, so the only choice is to get ahead and report the event from his point of view. The Hokage's group will undoubtedly be slower, but they will give the Fire Lord an hour or two to gather his court. In addition to returning the young prince, the Yandame's old guards can also brief the fire leader. The prince and his guards, however, will go by Hiration with the Yandame's old guards. Similar to the Hokage's crew, they reach the capital in about an hour. They must somehow put on a show, which is how they begin chaining the Hulk. The monster was obviously not happy. It's alright Naruto, just think of them as jewelry or decoration. Remember I am giving you ramen for this. The old man might as well go along with it since he pulled out the ramen card. This is how the group enters the daimyo's court as the Hokage prepares to present his case. The audience erupted in laughter as they saw the real Hulk for the first time. They had undoubtedly seen him on posters, but none of them did him justice. Oddly, they gave him a huge bowl of ramen as soon as he sat down, while the shinobis held him to the ground. In addition to a massive pair of handcuffs over his wrists, he had a steel ring around his neck that was attached to multiple chains that were nailed to the floor, leaving ample space for him to contentedly slurp his ramen. The Hulk is higher than everyone, even though he is on the ground. To say that he is scary would be an understatement. His body alone is enough to frighten anyone. The prince entered the room just before the court was set to convene. "What's the meaning of this? What are you doing here?" "Father, it's my case, it's only reasonable I should be present and decide the punishment." The prince glanced at the ninjas there before turning to face the heavily shackled behemoth, but the daimyo scowled and remained silent, believing it was his opportunity to show himself. He obviously believed that he would be safe from the monstrous creature with such security and restriction. At that point, he decides to show everyone how courageous he is by facing the green abomination, but he is ignored because the giant is only interested in eating his absurd bowl of ramen. To get his attention, the prince knocks it off. "Look at me when I am talking." Since the Hulk is happy to eat his ramen, he is relatively harmless. Even the 4 highly skilled shinobis could only stare in shock because none of them could have predicted that he would become this physical. His action surprised everyone in the room because no one expected him to do that, which is why no one was able to stop him. Unfortunately, what has been done is done, and the Hulk is now fully focused on the prince. Unfortunately, this attention also brought with it his angry glare, which scared the teenager even more and sent him to the ground. If that wasn't bad enough, the Hulk then decided to use all of his strength. Since the prince has fallen on his ass, the scene can only be described as his worst nightmare. Then there are the steel chains that look sturdy but are actually capable of crushing his legs. They fell like a pile of compressed bricks, shattering the courtroom tiles as they hit them. The prince unreservedly pulled back his legs to prevent them from being crushed. These were obviously not your typical chains, but the giant broke them with ease and without using any of his hands. The adolescent is obviously aware of his error and the mayhem he caused. Bringing this monster to the capital is a further mistake that will ultimately lead to their demise. His worst error was to enrage it, and if that wasn't terrible enough, he had done so again. Sadly, he decided not to watch it the first time because he believed he had escaped. Now, he is unsure of his chances. He should have realized that none of his samurais were a match because he had sensed his abilities the first time. The ninjas were correct to break up the fight because he knew in his heart that none of his guards were capable of handling him. Unfortunately, it's what brought down countless nations as he questions whether today is his day. The Konoha ninjas chose not to fight him, thus it's clear they understood they lost. The prince is by no means ignorant, he's just blinded by his own pride. Since this only transpired a few seconds ago, the courtroom is remarkably quiet as the prince receives his revelation. Most of them have not yet registered the shock as their brains attempt to digest the chaos that just occurred. From the prince destroying the giant's food to the Hulk's ease of escape, Hulk ramen. He's obviously upset with his ramen. Nobody gave a damn about his poor language, which should have read, Hulk's ramen, or, my ramen. Their first thought was, shit, where on fire country do we find him ramen? Some people even ask, what is ramen? Some were unlikely to come across such cuisine because they are politicians and lords. Ramen are typically consumed in tiny eateries or stands where regular people congregate to eat, hence, it is doubtful that these individuals would enter such a place. Quick thinkers likely assumed, it must have been that thing he's been eating. Unfortunately, their kitchen isn't in the next room, let alone feeding them, so this is a difficult request. A fresh, steaming bowl of ramen was placed in the prince's hand just as the Hulk was about to grab it. It's obvious why they got him one in the first place, but there was an awkward moment as everyone waited to see how he would respond. He looked into his new bowl, then to the ruined one, and back and forth again, which only made everyone follow his line of sight as they tried to figure out what's going through his mind. Those who knew him knew that he would make the scene anti-dramatic as he takes his time to think it over, but when he does that, everyone can't help but get rope into it. The question is similar to, should I eat my new ramen, or, should I avenge the ramen? You can practically hear the silent cries of, take it, and, just take it, in the courtroom as a result of everyone in the room trying to help him by forcing their ideas on him since they couldn't help but perspire. As if hearing their mental encouragements, the Hulk turned to them before sitting and eating his new ramen. The crowd cheered, but only in their imaginations. Their faces were like gambling addicts waiting for their winning card for a straight flash, or for their carefully chosen horse to cross the finish line. The shinobis questioned whether they were ever like this when it happened to them. Because no one dared to say it aloud, an agonizing situation like this can occur with the Hulk. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief when they see the giant choose to eat his ramen in peace, while the prince remains on the floor, his legs no longer responding to him. His father swiftly got rid of him by having him taken to his room because he didn't want another mess to start. The Hokage, of course, was aware of this and assumed that everything was under control when he saw the shinobis on standby. In addition, he had no reason to believe that the ninjas who had worked with him for years would abandon him now. Throughout all of this, only the daimyo remained as skeptic and composed as the Konoha ninjas. The entire scene actually made the man laugh a lot, especially when the Umbu summoned the ramen and placed it in the giant's hand. The placement and unsealing were flawless and executed with perfect precision. It's clear that they must have employed the same tactic countless times. It's funny that the other three Umbus also have the same scrolls, which only made the fire leader raise his eyebrows more. Unbeknownst to the Hokage, the daimyo had also heard great things about the giant and had intended to travel to see it for himself. In addition to Konoha, the daimyo also had his own people to watch over his nation, which is how he found out about the Hulk. However, with all the Hulk posters around, it's easy to find out about his existence. He said nothing but, "Sarutobi, we should talk," as they fled the mayhem. The Hokage chooses to strike up a discussion as soon as the two enter the private study. "I would have expected you to be more angry or surprised. I take it you've already learned about the Hulk." Perceptive as always Sarutobi, you are right, I've heard much of his exploits. My own sources had given me enough for me to get an idea what he is. And I must say, having seen him in person and reading his accomplishments, I was thoroughly impressed. Thank you, my friend, I too am very proud. Listen, just out of curiosity, could you or any of your men stop him if things go out of control? He didn't specify if this, out of control, was referring to the previous incident or to life in general, but the Hokage was obviously aware of what the Lord was thinking. At that point, the daimyo turned around and looked him in the eye. Clearly, he expected an honest response. He paused before giving him what he wanted, saying, I believe that's a question I would rather not answer." With a heavy sigh, that powerful You should have seen the first time he appeared. We had 200 elites trying to stop him and yet he just shrugged them off like they were nothing. In order to preserve their honor, he made no mention of any clan, but 200 shinobi were nonetheless stunning. Thankfully he did eventually come to his senses, thus prevent the inevitable. He had only grown stronger since then. Yeah, I've read the reports, over 300 missing means. Just where exactly did he find them? I seriously doubt you have that many foreign ninjas near Konoha. The fire chief half joked, did he pick them off trees? He's intrigued since he didn't realize there were so many foreign ninjas in the area of Konoha. You weren't too far from the truth, even my umbus were still trying to get over it. I have reports saying he's been shaking occasion trees just to see if they do fall from them. As disturbing as it sounds, when they do he just picks them up and take them to the nearest guard in exchange for ramen. The daimyo nearly spills the tea he's sipping. Ever since one of the umbus offering him ramen, he's been picking them up more diligently. Good thing out of that is we have less and less foreign ninjas near our village. The daimyo had to perspire since he could see how spies would steer clear of Konoha if they continued to lose soldiers. Since the daimyo was obviously interested, the two then trade off more of the Hulk's escapades. It's always a good idea to stay on the daimyo's good graces rather than his bad. Eventually, they still need to return to the actual matter at hand. Seriously, my friend, I didn't plan on punishing your Hulk. It's obvious that the event took an unexpected turn, which is why the Hokage stumbled. It's not that he stumbled, rather, he was a little stunned because everything worked out better than he had anticipated. This is good news because Konoha can't afford to lose the Hulk or their Kyubi Jinchuriki. He's ready for some difficult negotiations and the possibility of losing money. According to the Fire Daimyo, what do you think people would say? Hero jailed for protecting a child from the Fire Lord's spoiled son. I certainly don't need that kind of publicity. Surely you must have seen the posters in my capital, they are everywhere. Your Hulk's already a celebrity, heaven knows how you managed to get him do those adverts. He is correct in saying that the incident story could not be kept under wraps and that the Fire Daimyo's reputation would suffer when people learned about it. Anyway, to be honest, my old friend, as you can see, I have been having some trouble with my son. I knew how you pretend to look the other way. I had my people report to me on what he's been doing. Clearly the latest incident, the wrong is on my son's side. I know I should be tough on him, yet I still find it difficult to actually punish him. The Sandaime understood because he had issues with his grandson as well. It seems that their issues were similar, but the solution was somewhat the same. Well, I too did have problems with my grandson, Konohamaru. Somehow Naruto managed to straighten him out without my interference. The fire leader asks, Naruto? Ramen topping? Who is he? Actually you have already met him, his full name is Naruto Uzumaki. He was the same guy that messed up your son, ! Was the fire leader's startled response. After giving the idea some thought, he smiles slyly. He remembered his son's reaction when the giant betrayed him. His son's samurai handlers were too lenient or careless, so it only makes sense to hire someone tougher. The Hokage was correct, maybe someone with more muscles would make him see sense. He thinks he wouldn't go too far on a civilian after hearing many stories about the Hulk in Konoha, but after hearing more from the Hokage himself, he's more sure. He doesn't think his kid has the courage to strike or enrage him, so he assumed it's possible. Alright, Sarutobi, you have convinced me. As punishment for injuring my son, for the next 2 weeks I want this Naruto to act as bodyguard for my son. I will sweeten the deal and pay you a rank mission. How's that? That's more than enough. A usual B rank would be enough considering the Hulk would need a retainer just to keep him in line. Nonsense, I would have paid a S rank if it could help my son. He obviously did not hire Naruto/Hulk as a mere bodyguard. Because he is so short and noisy, the fire leader's kid first didn't think much of Naruto/Hulk, but as they spend time together, things start to change. This is how they got another private mission to babysit the fire leader's son. Hey, where you going? We were told to wait here for your tutors. You are not my father, you can't tell me what to do. After saying, just shut your mouth and pretend to do your job, he left. Look, your father hired me to keep you out of trouble. I am not going to slack off. As a punishment for offending the daimyo, Naruto was told that he would be his son's bodyguard. The Hokage stated that this mission is crucial to the village, so the blondes are not going to take it easy. After all, The fire daimyo did advise him to be strict if necessary and to be himself. As a result, after receiving the letter's instructions, Naruto refused to move or comply with the prince's requests. After all, what kind of Hokage would I be if I don't do what my mission tells me to do? You, Hokage. Don't make me laugh, I have seen more worthy candidates. Don't try to follow me or I'll have you whipped or locked up for getting in my way. Things start to alter at that point since a tree abruptly blocks his way. You stay, the Hulk said, taking Naruto's place and glaring at him with death glares. The prince froze, instantly recognizing the tone and voice, and slowly turning his head to witness his dread come true. He quickly turns to go, refusing to listen to or remain around such a creature. As much as he wanted to yell, "Guards, come to me, guards," but the fire daimyo made sure that no one answered. The man had heard the Hokage's past experiences and knew why he didn't want anyone to confront the giant. He could have requested a demonstration, but he didn't want the giant to reflect poorly on any of his men, so he didn't. Then there are the Chunin exams, which are not far away, and the Hokage expects Team 7 to be entered, so he can always see him in action then. According to the Sandaime, as long as they are still on his good side, there won't be any problems. It's obvious that this is the most sensible solution, and the daimyo agrees with the reasoning. The teenager has been wondering for the umpteenth time whether the insane monster is attempting to kill him or stop him. Rather of dashing into trees, he has been jumping out from their path. He had to roll away quickly to avoid being crushed, but by that point, he was unable to complain because another one arrived shortly after. The backyard turns into a maze before he knows it, and even he struggles to find the way out. He eventually exhausts himself and is lifted up by the monster, who then drops him back where they started. "Why are you keeping me here?" As he finger rubs his head, he confesses, "Hulk not know." The prince is dumbfounded and tries to stare back without saying anything, but he is too worn out and exhausted to care any longer. For a while, the two remain silent and remain where they are. Sadly, they were only told that their students were waiting for them in the garden. None of them informed them that there was a huge maze they had to first navigate. Of course, the servants were also unaware at the time, so one can pardon them for not bringing it up. It took the tutors more than 2 hours to locate them as they eventually made their way through the newly constructed maze. They had no idea that the fire leader and the Hokage were both keeping a close eye on them. See, like I've told you, while unorthodox, Naruto sure has his ways. As they reviewed the outcome of their first encounter, the two were sipping their afternoon beverages. At the moment, the fire daimyo was admiring his new garden while massaging his chin. It may need a little refinement, I am sure my gardeners can fix that. The daimyo never considered obtaining a maze garden, thus this is a startling change of events. As the days go by and the Hulk keeps coming back, the prince quickly realizes that trying to outrun him is pointless. He's like a dog chained to its vicious and unforgiving master. When he says stop, he must stop, and when he says walk, he must follow. At least with Naruto, he has much more freedom, so he tries to win the genin over. Additionally, the Umbu helpfully brought up the fact that the young girl he had roughed up while in Konoha is one of Naruto and the Hulk's very few friends. He also mentioned that the day he arrived was the young girl's birthday, and the Hulk was celebrating her special day until he arrived. The prince is aware of Naruto's odd triggers by now, and he avoids using them, which brings out his harsh guardian. This makes Naruto's job much easier and improves his relationship with the teenager. Of course, he has no idea what happened, or else he would have beaten him up whether or not he is a daimyo's son. However, after he is done, there's no guarantee the Hulk won't take over, so the beating would continue. As he realized what kind of person Naruto is, the prince realized what the samurais had warned him about. They referred to him as the determined or headstrong type, and there were very few who would eventually stand out. At first, the prince sees the genin as crude, unrefined, loud, and foolish, but the longer they spend together, the more he recognizes something in him. The blonde may not like them, but since they say that he should know if he still wants to be Hokage, he has forced himself to wake up no matter how dull they were. Naruto may serve as his guard, but he also participated in the young prince's lessons, learning a little bit about politics, dress codes, and most importantly, manners. Like those who knew Naruto, the prince was curious as to why he wanted to be the Hokage. The elder adolescent asks the genin, "Why do you want to be Hokage anyway?" I am depicting the prince as being around 15 to 16 whilst Naruto is at 12. Naruto paused to think about his response to the inquiry, but ultimately chose to give him the truth. It was used to be my dream, to stand on top of everyone so they can respect me. However, Naruto did state that this was once his motivation. He wonders what happened today as he pays a little more attention to his next response. His first response reminded the prince of his previous acts since he too wanted to be viewed as his father's heir. Ever since becoming genin and seeing the real world out there, I found my ideal being pretty shallow. Then I realized even by some miracle I do become a leader, I wouldn't be a very good one. Out there I watched my friends die, Sasuke and Haku. I learned about real sacrifice. Naruto then briefly reviewed his memorable mission and provided some background information on his friend/enemy. How many sacrifices must a Hokage make before they are deemed great, he questions himself. He didn't want his path to Hokage to be an easy one, but as he overcame every challenge, he hoped that at the end of that path he would be the Hokage he had imagined. It then became his path in his ninja way because the path to greatness is never an easy one. However, his goal pales in comparison to Haku's dedication and sacrifice. No matter how pampered the prince was, he couldn't bring himself to despise those remarks after hearing them. The blonde is undoubtedly foolish and stupid, but the path he set for himself isn't something anyone should take lightly. Nevertheless, in the brief time they have spent together, he has seen him stay true to his word and never waver from his convictions, which even the prince had to admire. At the end of his 2-week mission, the prince finally found the courage to speak with Naruto. Unfortunately, but predictably, things didn't go as smoothly as he had hoped. Naruto isn't the smartest of the bright, as he at least didn't know who he was talking about, and it took some time for the prince to get through to him because he didn't know his friend by name. When he eventually got through, though, Naruto reacted angrily as he had anticipated. At first, he didn't believe he was referring about his young buddies, but when the prince said, "young friend," Naruto mistook it for Konohamaru rather than the kindergarten sort. Assuming Konohamaru is 2 to 3 years older than Naruto, who is 9, our young girl is approximately 4. Upon realizing who it was, Naruto became enraged and reminded him by punching him and causing him a black eye. The prince apparently anticipated this and ordered everyone to stand down in advance. However, some guards don't appear to agree, arguing that since he is a daimyo's son, he shouldn't bow down to any ninja, much less a genin. Thanks angered, but remember I am not yet a daimyo, in fact all my past actions aren't even fitting as one of the royalties, so I will apologize for all the troubles I have caused to all of you. From now on I want to walk the path I consider as true royalty, so please let me do this my way. Also let me repent to my sins to the very person showing me the right path. Since they had all been keeping watch on him since his birth, some of the guards broke down in tears when they saw him behaving so self-sufficient. Everyone simply let it happen as it was, but only Naruto dared to punch the prince in the face in front of the royal court. Fortunately, the Hulk stayed hidden, and Naruto was able to control his rage. The teenager did promise to make amends to his friend, so he will keep his word. Before leaving, Naruto assured him that if he didn't follow through on his pledge, he would return. The prince looked back gravely into the genin's eyes and uttered, "I will swear it on the throne, I will be there, I hope you will be there too, Naruto." To show the young ninja how serious he is, he remarked out loud in front of everyone. Everyone else was shocked by the scene, but only the daimyo and the Hokage were happy with the outcome. The fire daimyo was especially happy because he could finally see his son as a successor. His words carry some weight because they demonstrate conviction and resolve. Naruto only realized he had punched the daimyo's son when he approached him. Sorry about that, there was some sort of misunderstanding. Don't worry about it, young man, I can see it's something between the two of you, so I will let it slide. He nearly joked when he said, "Just don't let it happen too often," but Naruto wasn't sure if he meant it or not. Sure thing, you are the boss. Ha, 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 ha. Anyway, in regard to the mission, I must say you did splendidly. No problem, Naruto Uzumaki, always at your service. He then turns to face the Hokage. Come on, old man, let's head home. Since the Sandaime coughed in an embarrassing way, it's clear who he's talking about. He had neglected to urge the boy to stop his normal shenanigans for formal reasons. In the brief time they knew him, he had punched the daimyo's son, spoke to the fire leader as an equal, and then referred to the Hokage as an old man. His tutors simply slapped their heads in embarrassment, wondering if he had paid attention to any of their lessons. Others questioned whether he was another prince or someone on the same level as the daimyo and Hokage. The girl was a little scared because she remembered that it was the scary prince again, but fortunately, things went a little more smoothly. The prince did, as promised, come to Konoha to apologize, and her big brother had already disciplined him for it. As evidence, he showed her his still fading black eye, which caused her and her friends to giggle a little. She may have been scared by the experience, but at least everything worked out. In addition, the prince did come to apologize and brought many gifts and presents, but he stated that his goal was to truly make amends and repair the harm done on her special day, not to win her forgiveness. Naturally, the village heard about the unbelievable event, so it became the subject of another story. By connecting the incident to the Hulk, the villagers also learned about Naruto's actions as they started to realize the boy's potential. Since the Hulk was unable to persuade the prince to apologize, Naruto must have talked some sense into him. As a result of this incident, the future Fire Country ruler became less spoiled. Since the Hokage's conversation with the daimyo didn't go as planned, Naruto is punished by being sent to fire prison for a few months. Don't worry, Naruto, just think of it as a vacation away from the village. Vacation? The guards in the vicinity believed they had overheard the conversation. Few people would think of prison as the perfect place to go on vacation, but who knows what it will be like for him. No prisoner had ever been like him. Even though they didn't fully understand the situation, they had to process Daimyo's entry because they recognized his personal seal. Since the big guy must have done something serious if he was personally involved, no one questioned the order or thought about the consequences of housing him. Still, it feels like trying to fit an elephant into a dog house. At least the main entrance is wide enough for the big guy, and they were relieved that the inside was someone else's problem. Notwithstanding this, the fire prison was constructed specifically to house all types of inmates, including dangerous missing means and those with particular bloodlines. Because it is well funded, it has state-of-the-art facilities to house these inmates, including special cells for ninjas like the Hozuki clan, which prevent them from escaping even when they are liquid. In addition to specially made chakra suppression seals, the prison is said to have adamantium suppression chains that can suppress chakra and ninjas with abnormal strengths. That's most likely the main reason the fire daimyo is sending him in there. There are rumors that the design was initially set up against the rakeage, but they aren't very common. The Fire Lord could always deny them, claiming they are rumors, because no one could confirm their existence because it has never been used. In any case, to put it succinctly, the prison is well funded and can house any prisoner known to exist in Fire Country or in any other way in the Elemental Nation. At least that's what they believed until the Hulk's existence was made public. This is because no prisoner has ever been like him, so the staff and facility will be put to the test. In addition to being the product of a botched experiment, the Hulk is also not your typical ninja. The Sandaime tried to warn the daimyo, but the man ignored him, believing that anything the Hokage said was a justification for not bringing charges against his ninja. He understands that the elderly ninja has a sentimental bond with the child, but since the child is also a ninja, he failed to realize the significance of the situation. As the Hokage persists, "But my lord, I implore you to reconsider." Without allowing him to respond, the Fire Lord went on, "Sarutobi, I have already explained to you my reasoning, why couldn't you understand? This is just a farce, a show for the public and only for a short while. Surely your shinobi can handle a couple of months in my prison. Think of it as an active mission," he continued. The Fire Lord obviously wants people to believe that there are consequences for assaulting his son. But, my lord, the Fire Leader regrettably says, growing irritated. "Answer me this, Sarutobi, can't your shinobi handle himself?" He demanded a swift response, saying, "You assured me that he's perfectly capable of handling himself, is that not true?" "It's true, but I am more concerned about him on the other matter. He's quite a handful and can be very difficult." He wants the Fire Leader to understand that Naruto poses a threat to everyone in his vicinity, but he didn't want to give the impression that the child is a disaster. In fact, he is, but how you handle him will determine that. You let me worry about that. As I said it before, it's only for a few months and I will inform the guards to take it easy on the kid. That puts an end to it because it is obvious that the Fire Lord misunderstood the circumstances or simply did not want to hear them in the first place. In any case, Naruto will be alright. The old ninja, on the other hand, is more worried about the facility because he has heard that the Fire Lord has invested a significant amount of money in it. The entire situation reminds him of all the new reconstructions they had in Konoha, and from what he understood, almost the entire village was rebuilt. He kept telling himself, everything must eventually be replaced for the benefit of the village, similar to Hokage's. Even yet, he couldn't help but think back on the past, so every time the large guy smashes another monument, he gets a bit upset. However, he can't get too upset because the kid put a lot of effort into making everything he shattered. He sighs inwardly and reminds himself, I suppose that in order to adapt for the better, things must change. Nevertheless, he hopes the Fire Lord won't hold him responsible for the overwhelming amount of bills and construction contracts on his desk. The child has good intentions and tries his hardest to help others in both forms. Whether he were the Hulk or not, he would have likely done the same. His larger form is more destructive, though, because of his ignorance and accident-prone physique, which amplify the effect proportionate to his size. Things like that cause him to be beaten up, and missing means is the norm. The Sandaime had seen Tsunade beating up some poor ninja, believing they had deceived her, and he thought it might have something to do with his luck. Maybe the kid is now cashing in on the luck that fate had cheated out of him. He was surprised that it hadn't happened sooner. Whatever it is, the Sandaime hoped his luck would continue. However, he also took his time talking to the daimyo in order to talk to Naruto, not Hulk Naruto, but Naruto, and to his surprise, he remained the Hulk the entire time. The Sandaime could see the damage he had already caused because the broken ceiling and bench were major clues to what had happened, and it was useless to talk to the big guy because he would forget them in a matter of minutes. If he's just Naruto, he could at least minimize needless collateral damage, both for the palace and the prison. The destroyed bench was most likely the result of his attempt to avoid unintentionally damaging anything. The palace guards were wise enough to refrain from giving him any more instructions because doing so would only make matters worse, but it was likely his ninja guards who gave them that advice. They were likely motivated by the sight of the big bowl of ramen he was eating. The chamber had seen better days, so it wasn't only the shoddy bench and the ceilings. The Hokage could infer what had happened from the devastation tracks, which included Hulk-shaped dents and impressions on the walls and ceilings. He pondered whether the Fire Lord would charge him for this. In order to avoid the fireworks, the Sandaime and his group hurriedly left the scene. He still needs to explain his new mission to his thick-headed giant subordinate/grandson figure, but the Hokage tries to postpone it as long as possible, so they had to leave midway because he had to return to the village. Remember, this is a mission, you just have to remain in place for 3 months. He makes an effort to speak in short, easy-to-understand sentences. He wanted to be sure he understood, so he said, "Naruto, repeat my orders. Hulk stay, 3 months." The Hokage nodded, seeing that he comprehended his command. "Right, very good Naruto, I am afraid here is where we part ways. These ninjas will escort you to the place, just follow their instructions, okay?" Once more, the green giant nodded in understanding, but the elderly ninja noticed some melancholy in his eyes and offered him some support. "Hey, Naruto, 3 months will be over in a flash." He paused for a second before continuing. "Listen, when you come back, you get an all-you-can-eat at Ikaraku's." He knew the final trump card worked because of the way his eyes nearly lighted up. Being a fair leader, he would not place unreasonable demands on his ninjas. This is particularly true for his grandson figure, who occasionally grows into a giant. He complains about the 3 minutes it takes for his instant noodles to cook, so you can imagine how miserable 3 months would be for him. Even telling him to stay in one spot is difficult because, for a hyperactive child like him, it would be like telling a toddler not to move or sit still. He therefore offered him a reward for remaining there for a set 3 months, and since it was Naruto, he knew he could somehow fulfill that. The old leader pats him on the arm to encourage him and let him know that he is leaving. If he is able, he should pat him on the head or shoulder, but his giant form is simply too tall unless he is jumping. "See you in 3 months, Naruto, take good care of yourself." The group splits in two, with 2 ninjas accompanying Naruto to prison and the other 2 protecting the Hokage. As the ninjas handed over the papers, the 3 arrived at the fire prison. The guards were aware of a new prisoner, but they were still taken aback by his size. Even so, his massive muscle mass was the least of their concerns because it posed a serious threat to them. To try to divide the disparities, they had 8 guards. One of the ninjas said, "Don't worry, he's harmless." Unfortunately, they gave the monster apprehensive looks and even backed up a significant step when the giant grunted in answer, suggesting that they didn't believe him. The ninja escort appears to comprehend him in some way. After some time, he continued, "Don't be like that Naruto. Think of it as a vacation." Vacation, The gate guards were thinking that as they mentally repeated the idea. They have conflicting opinions about this, but given his construction, they doubt their concrete walls will be able to keep him out. Although there is drama in prison life, nobody would dare question a man whose fist is the size of your head. It would be like prodding a bear with a stun rod, so only an idiot or fool would try it. After realizing this, they reached the same decision. Perhaps they were correct, the green guy might be on vacation. But in contrast to the ninja escorts, will Naruto revert to his previous form as the Hulk? The geeks back home may not have any proof, but the working theory is that he is acting that way to protect his other half. Based on observations and past experiences, it doesn't seem wrong. They were still hoping to see a smaller version of him before they left, but they assume he will remain Hulk for a while. According to what they know about him thus far, it's like watching their children grow up and take responsibility. Because of this, both Naruto and the Hulk gain the respect and support of many ninjas. The big guy has a sharp and powerful instinct, so he probably kept himself in control unconsciously. He knew he was in serious trouble, so either he's protecting the weaker Naruto or he's stepping forward for the punishment. His ninja escorts made sure the warden was warned and gave him a letter to give to Naruto after he de-transformed. Unfortunately, the warden still has to obey his boss's, Fire Lord's, orders, which is to keep the large man inside his facility. The warden had a bad premonition the moment he saw him, like leading an elephant through a museum with glass displays. Even so, he had to process him due to the Fire Daimyo's seal. The warden is in charge of the proceedings, and the uneasy feeling persists. As they led him further into the prison, they drew a lot of curious onlookers, and some of the inmates even crossed their hearts as though in prayer. Is the daimyo or warden punishing them? It wasn't just the inmates, the guards were also staring at the newcomer incredulously. A few swallowed, hoping their shift would end soon so they could start calling in sick because they knew there was nothing they could do to stop this mountain of muscle. If that wasn't awful enough, they quickly encountered some clear complications. He's too large. While some enormous inmates and missing means may exist, none of them resembled the Hulk. The Hulk, like he typically did in Konoha, remodeled each entryway he passed through, making each guard gasp uneasily, and forced himself in before anyone could stop him. Did you notice that? Obviously, this one cannot speak. He ripped through the doorway as if it were inconsequential. They behaved professionally and escorted the enormous behemoth to his cell since there's no point in moping over things that have already happened. Prisoner 100136650, this will be your room for the duration of your stay. You will remain in there until we tell you otherwise. The Hulk merely looks at the guard incredulously during that exchange. The prison will eventually realize that communication is another problem. Based on our hero's expression, he's not even sure if he's speaking to him, so the number wouldn't mean anything because he probably wouldn't remember it. They will also discover that, similar to Konoha, it will take time to get to know him before they can properly communicate. Based on that exchange, the Hulk likely only understood the two words, your room, and entered, again breaking protocol because he normally must wait for the guards to open the cell before he can enter. In any case, it won't matter because they will soon discover how secure their cell is to the Hulk. He casually rips the steel door open and stares at it dumbly for a moment before the guards stop him. The Hulk probably just thought that he shouldn't have done that because it's a sliding door and pulling it would tear it out of its frame. Seeing that there isn't much he can do about it, he hands it to the wide-eyed guard without thinking, and the poor guard takes the offered item without thinking. By that time, it's too late, as the heavy-duty cell door slowly tips over and crashes on top of him. Several guards and inmates watched this with wide eyes, gazing incredulously at the walking nightmare. This is our newest prisoner. That door must have weighed more than 100 kilograms, 220 pounds. You notice that he tore it out as if it were paper. Is he human at all? He's more like an extraterrestrial ogre. At close range, he resembles a moving mountain, which makes everyone gulp. What the devil is he? The word normal is just unthinkable. Don't they realize that there is a serious problem here? The warden apparently acted a little carelessly in this regard, simply stamping his entry. Since it was a direct order from the daimyo, he sees no reason not to process it. They were well funded to hold all kinds of criminals, including ninjas and those with special bloodlines. Even they can see that his size wouldn't get him through most parts of the prison, let alone his cell. Well, practically anything, as the large guy had previously caused a number of accidents. A few guards were alerted to the terrible scene by the noise, and they were left speechless. Hey, get me out of here. Their focus should have been on their actions, but they couldn't help but keep their eyes on their new prisoner. They will never forget the sight of him trying to force his way into his cell. Only then did they move to save their trapped and crushed colleague. The reinforced door is very heavy, requiring some effort from all of them to lift and move. Normal people would try to squeeze themselves in, but the Hulk is not like that. Instead, he squirms and wiggles his way in, furiously forcing his way in and remodeling the entrance as he sees fit. Because the bars were made of reinforced material, they wouldn't give so easily, which had the opposite effect of what was intended, cracking the foundation. The neighboring cellmate yells, "What's happening over there?" because he is unable to see anything. He's screaming in terror since he can't see anything, which is understandable given how distressed he is about his walls maybe collapsing over him. The cellmates on the other side yelled, "Shut your hole, just stand well away from the wall and keep quiet." They weren't doing any better either, and what they saw was kind of a nightmare they couldn't ignore. Regretfully, their worries aren't getting its attention at the moment, and whatever that green thing is, it looked angry enough, and they didn't want to reroute that rage by stoking an already raging fire. Seeing how he literally bent the reinforced metal with his bare hands, the guard dared not stop him. "What are you waiting for? Stop him. He will bring the whole prison down on us. Stop him." How, is a really good question, of course. Ultimately, their only option was to gaze. Use your stun batons, they aren't decorations. "No way, sir, what if it doesn't work?" "What if it doesn't work?" says he. A stun baton would be like a mosquito bite to the large guy, who appeared to be able to handle anything. More importantly, what if the behemoth becomes even more irate? The lead guard thankfully and understandingly refrained from acting on his own stupid suggestion, but now that his colleague brought it up, he too has a very bad feeling that it's a very bad idea. He's already looked angry enough, and for the sake of their health, they definitely don't want to add more fuel to an already burning fire. Fortunately, he finished remodeling the entrance, and the ceiling stopped collapsing. Just when they thought it was finished, the enormous giant stripped the beds, removed the mattresses, and began smashing the beds into a single, enormous metal ball. The scene was so shocking that nobody said anything. They somehow knew he could do it, but seeing it firsthand is a different matter. The guards in particular thanked themselves for not acting hastily, and the beds could have ended up in any of the following scenarios. He clearly had no use for the beds, so he disposed of them and placed the mattresses on the floor. Based on his arrangement, it appears that he was using them as pillows. Again, why hadn't someone considered that before placing him there? When the giant finally calmed down and fell asleep, the drama came to an end. He covered himself with a blanket that was obviously too small for his size, which made one feel a little sympathetic. What's still unsettling and distracting, though, are his feet protruding from his cell. He could have crammed himself inside more to fit in, but it makes sense that he wouldn't want to sleep so close to the toilet. Fortunately, there is a wall between his sleeping quarter and the toilet. However, there's also the issue of how he plans to use that facility. For obvious reasons, none of them want to know or find out, so they'll let the higher-ups figure it out. Regretfully, they have a feeling that a lot of improvisation will occur, and even then, they doubt it will be very helpful because they feel they won't deviate much from their current state of helplessness. Fortunately, the cleanup from the incident was easier. Because of safety concerns, damaged walls and structure, they had to move the other inmates. This took time and effort because the doors were broken or crooked. Ultimately, they moved inmates from both sides of his cell and above. Just in case, they also moved inmates to a different cell for safety. They will eventually learn to minimize damage by having all the doors in their path open. Rather than waiting for him to do so, they made sure they were all open beforehand to prevent him from tearing or ripping them off. This way, they can prevent another casualty from occurring, and at least the poor guard closest to him won't have to deal with another door that is too heavy for him. They seized the door, but why? Is it a conditional reflex, one could wonder. The Hulk's actions are deadly and nearly always successful, but once they are used, the doors and gates are more or less irreparably damaged, leaving the prison with no option but to leave them open. It's like catching something thrown at you, where you would accept it without question. It was all because of him that most entrances had to be remodeled. The word remodeled is just a nice way of saying that they didn't exactly hire builders or construction workers to do it. It's easier to let the big guy handle it than to wait for an agent, the remodeling agent, and he's also prone to accidents because he occasionally forgets to duck, which destroys the overhead entrance. Why was he sent here? This is an issue that is often raised and discussed within the institution. I heard that he's actually 12, no shit? He certainly looks nothing like 12, yeah, you said it. My cousin's kid's 15 and he looked nothing like him. With everyone staring at him, it's difficult to tell if he's kidding or not. Never mind that, what I want to say is, since he's 12, he's probably in his growth spurt, therefore more accident prone. You mean he's going to be like this the whole time? Most likely, they will need to exercise additional caution around him, the guards murmured. What kind of sicko put a 12-year-old kid in that body? What if he goes on a temper tantrum? They may imagine what a child could do with that power, but the jail would not be intact no matter how they interpret it. They can imagine how a child would stomp over a sandcastle art show while having a fit. We are doomed, aren't we? The others were forced to give a serious nod. A new guard shift arrived the following day, and they were shocked to see how exhausted their coworkers were. Since night shifts are typically calm and boring, they were unaware of what had transpired, and because the Hulk arrived late, they all missed him during the exchange. What happened? What's going on? The recently hired shift guards are curious about. The night guard said wearily, "You will find out," as he got up and walked to the changing areas. The newcomers watched the night shift guards go, tired, unsure of what's happening. The group moves forward, a little bewildered, and discovers the mess that awaits them. What the hell happened here, was followed by another. More importantly, what the hell did this? They were unable to understand how it was possible after seeing the entrances crooked. Chakra can be neglected by these reinforced steels. The first thing that came to mind was, A jailbreak? One said, that doesn't seem likely. Have you seen this? While attentively examining the tier. This looked like it's been ripped off. It looked like they were trying to get in rather than get out. They arrived in time for the breakfast shift at that moment. At the sound of, "Prisoner 103650 time for breakfast, get up and follow me," they turned to face the chaos. The added emphasis on "stare" simply suggests that all they could do was stare alarmingly when the beast appeared. The poor guard in charge of him was not in any better mental health because he was closest to him. He made the error of arriving early because he was summoned to his supervisor's office. "Hari, I have a delicate job for you. Yesterday, we admitted a new prisoner and I want you to lead him to the canteen." "Sir, I was not aware of a VIP prisoner." He is correct that inmates often do not receive preferential treatment. "This one's a special case, you will know when you see him, he's in H block." "H block, sir," he asked for additional information, such as the cell number. "Just head to H block, you will know immediately, just be very careful not to antagonize him." The mysterious message had Hari scratching his head, a little perplexed. What does he mean by not getting angry with him? What sort of criminals are we dealing with? As he travels, he begins to understand his supervisor's intentions and fears his encounter. The demolished entryway and damaged gates left little room for interpretation. What sort of creature did we acknowledge? His mind perceives it as a monster rather than a criminal. Since he knows of no missing mean who could carry out what he's seen, his negative feelings turned into reality by the time he arrived at H block. It reminded him of a horror film he had seen the night before, in which an ogre snatches people from a pitch-black cave. I knew I shouldn't have seen that fucking film. Very little was left to the imagination once the enormous, terrifying pair of green feet emerged from the busted cell. Unfortunately, the interior of the cell is extremely dark, making it impossible for him to see inside. "Shit, shit, shit," he cried, condemning his life and his impending action. He stands as far away as he can and lightly taps the bar with his baton. No response, **T. He repeated it, a little louder this time. Tap tap tap. Once more, no answer. "Hari, I hope he doesn't wake up grumpy because nobody can hear that while they're asleep." "Here goes nothing," he said, exerting a little more effort this time. Bang 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 bang. Fortunately, the feet stirred and there was a response. He expected him to be large, but seeing it in person is another matter. Eventually, to his astonishment, a massive head emerges. It is more frightening up close. Prisoner 103650, time for breakfast, get up and follow me." Even though he was able to separate his thoughts and gain some breathing room, he was still unprepared for the behemoth when he emerged from his cage in full force. He is twice as big as him and has a lot of muscle. Come, follow me, I will lead you to the cafeteria," Hari, unable to contain his laughter, said. Additionally, he was walking a little quicker to avoid being trampled. Regretfully, he was unable to ignore the loud stumping footsteps behind him, so he stopped at the checkpoint, stepped aside to ensure the giant wouldn't run over him, and yelled to the control room. "Open H14, but what he didn't expect was that the giant would advance and open the gate himself. Of course, the word "opening" isn't really accurate, technically, it's ripped apart. However, from the Hulk's point of view, he believed the guard was speaking to him, so he saw the H14 sign above and proceeded to open it. It was too late to stop him, and nobody informed him that it was a sliding door that was controlled remotely by an electronic switch, so he pulled the entire thing out. It's a huge gate, so it's not surprising that everyone was shocked. All they could do was stare at the scene with their mouths open, and what's more intimidating is that he made it appear simple. The guard now recalled the admonition from his superior. Take great care not to agitate him. Yeah, exactly, as if anyone could be cautious about that, as if anyone were foolish enough to irritate him. Due to the disturbance, additional guards arrived, although they were unsure of what to do at the scene. Shall we take him into custody? Dude, the prison is us. Should we hold him? Are you kidding me? I don't think 100 of us could stop him. Though their instincts were not as sharp as those of animals, they were nonetheless sensible to approach or risk needless harm. Worst of all, he might give them the enormous gate. They were correct, as evidenced by the frightened response from the guard next to him. Don't hand it to me. Fortunately, he arrived just in time, or otherwise the entire situation would have crushed him. He exhales in relief and commands, just settle it down and follow me. The Hulk, unsure of what to do, shrugs his shoulders and slams the gate behind him. Since it is obviously broken, it will no longer work. In fact, it only takes a few seconds for the entire thing to topple over and fall heavily to the ground. The guard hurried him along before he could do any more damage. Leave it, let's get going. He took sure to stand between himself and the gate at the next checkpoint this time. He made sure he was facing him and listening when he said, "Wait here, don't do anything." He turns to the control room after noticing his nod. Open H-15. After a moment, the door opened, and he entered the gate with pride, feeling somewhat relieved. Come on, follow me. He felt proud that he had prevented a catastrophe on his own, so he skipped a few steps. Regretfully, he most likely jinxes it when he hears loud metal groaning, snapping, and crashing noises behind him. He didn't have to look back to figure out who was to blame. In fact, his green giant charge was unable to get through and had to squeeze through awkwardly, which included remodeling the gate and creating another damaged entrance. The guard gave up and moved on to the next gate, reasoning that if he broke it, he might as well get ready for the inevitable. Of course, they could bring him food, but that wasn't considered at the time. In addition, it's the path to the yard and other areas of the prison, so it's better that they let him pass than to wait for the technician, constructor, or anyone else. He stood aside and said, "Just do as you want." Sadly, he didn't quite get it right as the entire gate was blasted off, crashed through another entrance, and ultimately destroyed it, including the control room. Panic ensued, and more guards arrived to witness the spectacle. This time, the Hulk understood very well. He walked confidently to the mighty gate and gave it the "kick the door down" treatment. The guard who is accompanying the loud groaning is both scared and ashamed. He is white-faced and has both hands on his cheeks. He is unable to determine whether he is experiencing a migraine or is simply yelling in frustration, likely both, but most significantly, "I hope that won't be deducted from my next paycheck." Fortunately, the final door comes next. It's a double door this time, and it's open. Here is the cafeteria, go queue up with the others. He was ready to turn around and report to his boss when there was another crash. No, no, no. Wouldn't he? The guard himself finds it impossible. The door can accommodate 5 people. Unfortunately, anything can happen when it comes to the Hulk. He's right, the entrance is sufficiently wide, but the overhead is too low for the large man. He must have crashed against it somehow, taking a chunk off. The guard is stunned as he muses inwardly. He is a walking catastrophe. His ultimate conclusion is that. Then he begins to reflect. Perhaps a lengthy vacation is in order. Unbeknownst to him, he will find it difficult to refuse that request because there will always be something to do when the Hulk is around. In the meantime, the guard's eye twitches as he swiftly turns around and leaves, acting as though he didn't see it. More significantly, he hopes he won't be held responsible for all of this mess. Because they had never witnessed anyone accidentally headbutt the overhead, much less crash through it, the room was silent when he arrived in the mess hall. It is therefore not surprising that every prisoner yielded to him. They clearly don't want to stand in his way if he can casually destroy the wall as if they were nothing. The Hulk picks up his breakfast after realizing he has a free line to the kitchen. Regretfully, he acts as usual because no one instructed him on how to acquire it. Ramen? The entire kitchen became silent at his odd request as everyone turned to look at him. By the time he woke up, the head chef was thinking about what he had said and was still amazed by his size. Was he giving an order or was he just asking? That was the first thought that entered his head. However, since no one dared to ask him or inform him that there was no ramen, it didn't matter. Even the guards stationed in the room were ill-prepared to see the big guy in person, let alone stand in the same room as him. Then there was the ramen, and even they were unsure of what to do because it's not exactly common prison food. During their debriefing, they were specifically instructed to leave the big guy alone and try to minimize damage. Similarly, the entire canteen heard his strange request, not only the cook and the guards, which is why there was a surprised hush. You think they're just going to tell him no, but that guy just rips through that door like it's nothing. Holy sh*t. For breakfast, ramen. Stop talking, he might hear you. Naturally, some individuals were just unsure of how to react to that comment, and many more had not yet recovered from the foolish request or the damaged entryway. Not only was the mess hall in disarray, but the kitchen was as well. Ramen? Where can we get him some ramen? Although it's a straightforward dish, surprisingly, it's not on the daily menu of jail fare. Sure, everyone eats ramen, but it's not a dish designed specifically for the inmates. I'm not sure if this is the case in Japanese prisons, but let's assume they don't for comedic effect. What do we do? I doubt any of us want to inform him that there isn't any. For some reason, there is suddenly a large gap between the cook and the giant. It is obvious that they have designated this area as a danger zone. The poor cook behind the kitchen knew that his response could mean the difference between his life and the fate of his kitchen, so he thought carefully about what to say. Normally, he would simply refuse him, as he should, but after seeing the aftermath of the heavily guarded entrance again, he had to change his mind. However, the truth would annoy the giant anyhow, as they don't have any ramen in prison storage. Ultimately, for his personal gain as well as his kitchen, of course, we will have ramen. Just a moment. After saying that, he reaches for the closest helper and gives him a stern look. I don't care how you do it, go and find me some ramen before he destroys my kitchen. The cook then spins around and gives the behemoth his biggest smile. It will take some time, we will have to make it fresh and just right for you. It's a pretext that should buy him some time. Please take a seat, we will have it brought to you when it's ready. Making ramen isn't hard, but making it for someone like the Hulk is definitely a challenge. He will need a very large pot, but serving it is a problem because there isn't a bowl the giant's size or chopsticks, and he had a suspicion the giant wouldn't know how to use them anyhow. Fortunately, his assistant found the key ingredient, the noodles, in the locker rooms of some guards and young apprentice cooks. Naturally, there is some drama, but it is swiftly over. Hey, that's my lunch. It's an emergence. The young man fiercely guards his food because he was unaware of the Hulk. Look, we are in a serious situation, it's a matter of life and death, just let go of your ramen. It's my only lunch, I don't have many expenses, it's all I can afford. Hey, Just let go, when this is over, we will make you your lunch. The chief was not idle either. He didn't ask what ramen he had, and he dared not approach him without his ramen in his hands, so he had to improvise. For some reason, meat, lots of meat, is at the top of the list. It's obvious that he's desperate, which is why he won over the packed noodle. Unfortunately, he will need to salvage more because he doubts the big guy will be satisfied with just a few packs. Mizuki, returning to our hero, after giving his order, he followed instructions and found a spot to sit and wait. Little did he know that someone else had been observing him more intently than the others, and that person was Mizuki, who happens to be in the same prison as the Hulk. Despite everyone in the canteen being there, Mizuki had a different plan for the Hulk, and he still curses the demon brat for all of his failures. The shiv he acquired was perfect as he approached slowly, and he knew he had to act quickly because he would be the only one foolish enough to cross the danger zone. However, just as he was about to stab the demon, the said demon turned around. He believed that God must have finally heard his prayers and sent him the target of his prey. He may not have everything for another breakout, but more than enough to exact his revenge. As a result, rather than driving it into the monster's stomach as he had planned, Mizuki ran headfirst into its arm, knocking himself out. If that wasn't humiliating enough, his target didn't even feel it as he literally walked over him, crushing him under his foot. Regretfully, the inmates, the kitchen staff, and the prison guards all watched in horror as the idiot's bones broke, making loud cracking noises. Some inmates lost their appetite, while the more unfortunate ones missed breakfast. They may not feel much sympathy for the ex-chunin, but that's not something they want to see on anyone. Fortunately, the idiot is still alive, but it might be more humane to end his suffering. When he recovers, there will be another private one-on-one and an investigation into how he obtained another tool. Prison regulations have been changing ever since he entered, and security has been getting better because of him. Nevertheless, they took him to the infirmary, where he will stay for a long time so as not to disturb the other inmates or the guards. Since inmates are now routinely inspected, it is more difficult for anyone to smuggle drugs, cigarettes, or weapons around. Needless to say, they are all furious with him. Ironically, Mizuki's position is similar to Naruto's from his youth, but the former teacher only considered getting even and being treated unfairly. In any case, the other inmates learned to avoid the green giant while the guards cleaned up what was left of Mizuki, and only the Hulk continued to operate as if nothing had happened. The warden, who was unaware of the canteen, was also present to watch the entire event because he wanted to personally confirm the incident from yesterday. Regretfully, it's worse than he anticipated, as he watches the kitchen alter the menu because of him. It's no surprise that the kitchen is now worse than an active battle zone, since Mizuki's action and aftermath just served to highlight how terrible the situation is. Even he had to swallow hard at Mizuki's state. Is the beef ready? It needs to be in perfect slices. How's the seafood coming? That needs to balance one another. What about the pork? Are they done? While his assistants handle the main toppings, the head chef works hard on the ratio and mixtures to combine them. It's not as simple as dumping them in one pot, the ingredients need to balance one another, otherwise, it would be like oil and water, ruining the taste. Everyone worked hard on the preparation, but the head chef figures out how to balance all ingredients proportionately. They may use instant noodles as a base, but the soup, side dish, and toppings are all fresh. The chef gave him a pair of makeshift chopsticks that suspiciously appeared to be made from a table's legs, but he chose not to use them and instead poured the ramen down his throat. This is likely why he attracted the attention of the entire canteen, who watched him eat in stunned silence. Oddly enough, he tilts to the side as if he's not willing to share. The others were unable to refrain from rolling their eyes. As if we wanted to steal your ramen, but if we value our lives, we couldn't anyway. Little things like that are what make people adore him. You won't have an issue with him as long as you don't walk on his toes, but that doesn't make him any less dangerous. In the meantime, the kitchen exhaled with relief, realizing that although they had survived a significant crisis, it was not the end. The chief chef yells, "Hey, don't relax, the breakfast isn't over yet, get back to work." Although it really depresses him, he had to do it since the entire kitchen felt as though they were going to take the rest of the day off. More importantly, we need to get more ramen fast. I have a feeling he will be ordering it for lunch and dinner. Even though it sounds absurd, his assistant oddly agreed and hurried off to place the order. The assistant is talented, and even though the head chef didn't give him all the information, he saw what he wanted. As a result, by lunchtime, all the ingredients for various types of ramen are ready, and the head chef is clearly happy, so he will be asking the Hulk which ramen he wants. They were therefore more ready for it when his hulking voice finally came. "Ramen, ha, yes, ramen, we have all the ingredients, do you have a particular favor? Miso, beef, chicken." Even yet, he is unprepared for what follows. Ichiraku ramen. The large green behemoth baffled him once more since he had no idea how to prepare it. Of course, he was familiar with Ichiraku, as almost all of Fire Country's chefs had heard of him. Tuchi Ichiraku had won every ramen cooking competition, so he was forced to give up. "Sorry, anything but Ichiraku, it's their secret, so no one could make it." He was brave to acknowledge it, but for some reason, he felt that saying it was preferable to trying to deceive him. When everyone believed he was dead, the green giant gave him a long look and then said, "Ramen." The head chef saw the change from Ichiraku ramen to simply ramen as a big relief, and he took it to mean any ramen. He therefore did everything in his power to make ramen. It may not be Ichiraku, but it contains almost every ramen favorite known to the elemental nation: miso, seafood, chicken, beef, pork, and pretty much every major ingredient combined into one bowl. When it comes to cooking, some ingredients may not mix well with one another, such as salt and sugar, oil and water, and some may even work against each other, ruining the original flavors. As a result, once he succeeds, he's qualified to challenge the gourmet world because it's never been done before, but that's a different story. Reporting. In any case, when the head guard finished tallying the damage in front of the warden at the end of the day, he couldn't resist asking, "Warden, why did you accept him here? You know we have no means to restrain him, let alone stopping him." He sighed to himself. "I know, but it's a direct order. Since the fire daimyo is in charge of their salary, it is clear whose order it is. With no disrespect, sir, why would he do that? He probably wants to use him to test the facility. There's a lot of investments in place and the big guy happens to be the perfect guinea pig. So, what do we do? The prison can't accommodate him." The senior guard gave a sign of approval and the warden went on, "Do what we can, we only have to keep him in prison, there's nothing about containment. Just focus on minimizing the damage. I will write a report to the daimyo, please find me a fast courier." "Yes, warden." He meant to say that he would bring up the matter with his boss in the hopes that he would take notice of the situation. Of course, he will need to be thorough in his explanations and justifications. Simply complaining won't cut it. He will need to write briefly about their countermeasures to demonstrate that he and his guards at least tried. Regretfully, even though his report and delivery were perfect, the message was not read, not because the Fire Lord ignored his plea, but rather because it was sitting at the bottom of the pile of paperwork he had chosen that day to take a break from. The warden assumed the worst and didn't want to hear any of it, so it fell further to the bottom as more documents piled on top of it until it was forgotten. Nevertheless, his report went on, but for some reason, it never quite made it to the man in charge. One of the many reasons is that the secretary went on vacation, so someone else took over and forgot to file it. In addition, it seems as though the universe is making sure it never reaches him, not the universe, it's the author. The first time it was lost in transit, it wasn't the ninja courier's fault because they are so trustworthy. The inexperienced secretary misplaced it, sending it to administrations instead of the daimyo's desk, and sometime during that process, the report was forgotten. Other times, she dropped all the documents in an accident, scattering them, and the report vanished because it was concealed behind a potted plant. When the most recent report finally made it to the daimyo's office, his wife's cat tore it into irreparable pieces. The flight. If they thought the first day was rough, he merely vanished a few days later. Needless to say, sirens were set off, and the guards searched the entire prison in an attempt to find him. How could such a large man have simply vanished? For crying out loud, he's a bright green. However, because of Mizuki's persistent attempts to break out, the jail security was excellent, so they didn't think they could miss anything. They searched every room, wall, and area for tunnels, but they were unable to uncover any. Nevertheless, they discovered some new projects from the former ninja Mizuki. He will be contacted by the interrogation team after he recovers. After hours of ceaseless searching, the large man suddenly appeared. Naturally, they want to know what occurred, but none is willing. This makes sense because nobody would dare question someone like him. However, when they did, all they received was, "Hulk tire, Hulk sleep, where were you sleeping?" Unfortunately, they were unable to get an answer because they paused too long and he had already moved on. He didn't appear to be lying because during the brief time they knew him, the large man had been discovered sleeping in a variety of strange places. By chance, one tower guard discovered him snoring on the rooftop, so they decided to leave him alone because it would be difficult to get up there. They had the tower lookout to watch him because they couldn't bring him down anyhow. Like those from Konoha, they discovered that it's best for him to do nothing because trouble will usually follow. He dislikes crowds and loud noises, so everyone lets him do as he pleases. The majority of them discovered this lesson on their first day. As a result, no one wants to coerce him into speaking during an interrogation. Instead, they followed him covertly over the course of the following few days to learn where he went. It seems as though he disappears into thin air, but the supervisors wouldn't accept any of it. "What do you mean he disappeared again? You must have missed something. Check with the tower guards, don't cover your screw-ups with your incompetence." "Yes, sir." Unfortunately, the tower guards' reports of the large green behemoth were negative. "Damn it, he's making a fool of us, he can come and go as he pleases." As the days went by, the guards stepped up their surveillance of him. They attempted a number of strategies to catch him in the act, but they were never successful. Some even concluded that there might be a trap door or even a magic door somewhere. What's even more ridiculous is that they concluded there might be more than one because the green giant can vanish in other places as well. "South Tower, the subject just disappeared from my vision, he should be coming your way, can you see him?" "Yeah, target confirmed, about to lose visual, he's coming below me, I repeat I am about to lose visual." As anticipated, the giant was once again gone as the guards below came into full view of the yard, so they had to move quickly if they still wanted to keep an eye on him. "South Tower, he's gone, can you see him anywhere?" As the tower guards scanned the horizon from within and outside the prison, there was a brief pause. They were equally perplexed. No, not a thing. They heard he could jump, so they didn't rule out the skies, but visibility is clear and nothing is visible, so they assumed there must be a secret door they were unaware of. Even if he managed to escape, there would be nothing for miles to see. That was another mystery that the entire prison has been trying to solve. Our green friend, unbeknownst to them, did not jump straight into the air. Instead, he went over the wall and remained out of sight. He only shot himself away like a bullet when he was certain they were not watching. For additional protection, he even went around to the opposite side before vanishing. However, those who knew Naruto personally would recognize aspects of his genius rubbing off the big guy. All that sneaking around is no different from the pranks he did in the past. If anyone from Konoha witnessed it, they probably wouldn't believe it because this is a side of the Hulk they never knew existed. It turns out that the Hulk made a detour back to Ichiraku. He was very cunning about it because no one noticed him until he was on the ramen stand. Tucci was taken aback when he first appeared. Naruto. How did you get here? The Hokage said you were in fire prison. He was unable to continue as he shushed him with his enormous finger on his mouth. SSH, Hulk ramen. He obviously wants ramen, but more significantly, he didn't want anyone to know he was here. Based on his expression, it seems like he's in a rush and will go after he's had enough. Tucci couldn't help but giggle when he saw this. Bah, ha 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 ha, you ditched them. The ramen maker couldn't help but chuckle aloud despite the apparent, yet the huge guy seemed rushed as he sympathizes. Ramen, Hulk go, he wants his ramen now, then he has to go, you say. Will also arrive soon. Hey, Dad, what's the hold-up? I thought you were taking a break. Chan, look who's here. She finds it odd that someone would enter through the rear. She covers her mouth as she nearly yells, Naruto. He clearly couldn't avoid Ikaraku's, so he must have slipped out. The prison either didn't know better or is already in disarray. She is initially stunned, but she immediately makes the connection and begins laughing at his antics. She tries to guide him to his typical location by saying, "Come on Naruto, you can sit by the front." She went on, "I am sure everyone misses you." Regretfully, he refused to move no matter how hard she pulled. "Leave him alone, he's probably on some secret mission or something. He probably had to sneak into the village without the ninjas or the Hokage knowing." Although no one in Konoha would rat him out, Naruto obviously didn't want anyone to know. It's odd to see him this way because the giant is usually so carefree and loud. Turns to him with the naughty boy look, and the Hulk looks embarrassed. Sighing in defeat, then sets up the back of the store for him. But this further demonstrates that he and Naruto are the same person. Only the blonde mischievous one could be this cunning and able to evade Konoha security. Since then, he has visited every third or fourth day, and Ichiraku has kept it a secret. Tucci is obviously curious to see how long it will take for someone to discover this, and it would be hilarious when it does because no one knew he was capable of it. Similar to others who are still perplexed in the prison, he is bright green. How can he move around undetected, particularly by ninjas? In the meantime, the prison is facing another problem that they are unable to resolve, the mystery of the empty takeouts they discovered in the rear of his cell. They weren't sure what it was at first, but when the guards went to look into the potent perfume, they found heaps upon heaps of ramen bowls that were empty. What did he do? Did he place a takeout order? Since there was nothing they could do about it, they had to leave it alone. They didn't want the issue to get worse before the person returned because he had damaged enough jail equipment for them to realize that trying to control him would be ineffective. They attempted to attach 3 heavy iron balls to each of his limbs, but he ended up becoming even more of a disaster than he already was. They couldn't hold him responsible because he wasn't doing it on purpose, and they are deadly to inmates, guards, and the prison complex in addition to being useless and not slowing him down. After he completes the fitting, the guard says, "Okay, big guy, it's done, you can go." The Hulk effortlessly raises the chain that is attached to the iron balls as if they were decorations. The guard realized then what was wrong. Perhaps 3 isn't enough, he thought in a quiet, anxious perspiration. He was aware of his strength, yet he carried the 50 kilograms ornaments as if they were weightless. Before he could express his worries, the giant fled, and screaming could be heard. This would be another unpleasant recollection of another cock-up when interacting with the Hulk. Their only solace is that they can now follow him along the path of destruction. Unfortunately, the plan was turned down because they pose a serious risk to inmates, guards, and the prison itself. In particular, because of the way he gets around by jumping over buildings and rooftops, the prison sustained significant damage from the iron balls, and one of the roofs collapsed because it was unable to support his weight and the additional attachments. The last straw was a string of complaints from the infirmary regarding the overcrowding of patients. The warden is just another page of the sloppy Hulk report that was sent to the daimyo. They even attempted to chain him to the wall, but the big guy broke them easily while trying to scratch an itch. He then tries to mend it by covertly tying the broken ends with a knot, which ironically breaks the other chain. Furiously, he shoves the chain into the wall and attempts to patch it up with dirt. Unfortunately, his attempt to conceal it was in vain because the evidence was visible on the opposite side of the wall. His actions only caused panic on the other side. In addition, the audience can be seen sweating during his antics on the live feed to the camera room, and the warden is massaging his temple for another headache that is occurring. "Just release him before he destroys anything else," he says. The guard acknowledged, "Yes, warden," and hurried to execute the command. Unfortunately, it was too late. To begin with, the guard was unable to unlock the chains due to a damaged keyhole or internal mechanisms. They were going to summon a locksmith when the large man became irritated and tore them off before giving them to the stunned guards. In the other room, the warden once again couldn't help but groan loudly as he massaged his head with both hands. He left by stomping out of the room, his loud steps causing the room to tremble and the wall to collapse, which was obviously weakened by his abnormal fixes. He is a walking catastrophe. Everything he comes into contact with breaks. "No," the warden said, losing count of all the colorful nicknames he could come up with for him. "He's a walking nightmare, menace, bogeyman." The first time it happened, the entire prison was in such a panic that an emergency evacuation was nearly triggered, and there were even casualties as guards and inmates alike were knocked out. He recalled a strange report when he listened to the earlier incidents. One was the sneezing incident that literally tore the prison. Although there were no major damages, there was enough chaos for the staff to spend the night cleaning up the place. Additionally, the cleanup was chaotic. The warden asks, "So, what happened?" after receiving a report from the guard in charge of the investigation. Sir, the green guy sneezed." "What?" "The new guy sneezed, sir. I heard you the first time. Are you seriously telling me that all this mess was because of one sneeze?" Even the guard had self-doubt, yet such was the conclusion of the inquiry. "Yes, sir, according to eyewitnesses from both guards and prisoners, they all point to him. The warden was at a loss for words. Everyone was grateful that the big guy didn't have a cold, because if he did, it would be disastrous and they might have to evacuate the prison. Typhoons outside are one thing, but having one inside is not something they can just laugh off. If he had been someone else, he would have laughed, but he is the warden. He may not have been the one cleaning up, but he still had to write a report and take responsibility, but he still hesitated because that report would be sent to the capital. Having the Hulk in their prison is generally unnatural because there is simply no way to stop, restrain, let alone contain him. All of their attempts to do so have so far failed spectacularly and caused additional damage to their facility. What's even more humiliating is that they weren't intentional, so they couldn't blame the big guy. In fact, the prison is only still standing because he is somewhat docile. If it had been anyone else, they would have fled on a rampage. However, they doubt that even the ninja villages could stop him if he went on a rampage, and all of their fancy ninjutsus, genjutsus, and ninja stuff would look like parlor tricks when it comes to the Hulk. They wouldn't be surprised if he could beat all of the ninjas with brute force alone, given the way he casually breaks and destroys their prison. The warden, on the other hand, was wondering why their daimyo hadn't responded. He had even checked with the courier ninjas, and they showed him the recipient stamp, so he had no reason to suspect the delivery system. Unfortunately, the last report marked urgent was left unattended somewhere because the new secretary was inexperienced and clumsy. Report on Fire Capital's prison. Upon returning from her 3-week vacation, the secretary was taken aback to discover one of the daimyo's reports beneath her desk. Although it was marked as urgent, she knew there was nothing she could do about it. What's done is done, so she shrugs her shoulders and adds it to the collection of reports addressed to the daimyo. As per her daily routine, she begins by watering the office plants and gathering and organizing documents from different departments. However, she is taken aback when she discovers another, urgent, marked report in one of the plants, which coincidentally comes from the fire prison. Without giving it much thought, the secretary made sure those 2 reports are at the top, and she will personally ensure that her lord sees them. On her way, she even came across one in the administrations, as the assistant explained that it was recently found among their documents. As she finds more reports from different departments, she questions whether someone is doing this on purpose, as if they are targeting the prison for a prank or some sort of sabotage. It's not that the others did a bad job, it's just that she's extra diligent and has a keen eye for details. In any case, she was able to retrieve the other reports before the end of her journey, save for the ones that the daimyo's cat had destroyed. In response to the urgent marked reports, the Fire Lord exclaimed, "What is this?" Without even opening them, he knew this was somehow related to the green giant he placed there last month. Normally, he would receive a bi-weekly or monthly report, but this quantity is worrying. He also noted right away that they all came from the fire prison, which made him feel depressed. "My lord, it seems they were unread report misfiled by the intern." "What? All of them?" "Yeah, I don't know why, but just this morning I found them scattered in various departments. It appears they all came from the same place, the fire prison." "Open them, open all of them," he commands his assistant in a hurry. His early negative prediction came true since every report he read was worse than the last. It appears that the majority of the bills were for damaged property that required repair right away. Reinforced steel doors replacement order. That was the first thing he saw, and he was immediately taken aback. Gosh, those were so damn expensive. To ensure their durability, seals were carved into the metals in addition to their special reinforcement. How is it damaged when it was said to be indestructible? It's difficult to forget the large green giant that used to reside in his palace, so he didn't have to think too hard to figure out who was to blame. Additionally, there are the lingering wounds he left behind. He was referring to the unintentional damage to the palace, which opened people's eyes, and the workmen are still working to repair it. I ought to have realized then. Damn, I was too conceited to listen to Sarutobi's warnings. Regretfully, that report contained other bills as well. Rebuilding demolished cell. How do you demolish a whole cell? He sobbed, but he could see how that would occur. The cells, which could accommodate 2 people, might be too tiny for the large man. Entrances remodeling requisition. What more than one as in plural? He can once more understand how that may occur. For example, when he subsequently read it again, he discovered that the request was for several doorways rather than just one entrance, and there was even photographic proof attached to demonstrate its sad situation. As the daimyo picked up the unusual bill, there's another odd one. Ramen supply order. His palace guards did mention the strange ordeal the Umbus went through to keep the big guy in check, and there were even discussions among his staff about visiting Konoha Ikaraku's because of it. He was unaware that ramen was on the menu, let alone that there was a huge supply-demand imbalance. Once more, the Fire Lord can attribute this to the enormous giant. Unfortunately, he realized he needed to take action after reviewing so many new bills from day one. Get him out, kick him out, do it before he destroys my prison. He ignored the Hokage's warning because he was overconfident in his prison and, as the warden had suspected, he had another hidden agenda. His prison had the most cutting-edge facilities in the country, including numerous sophisticated seals created by experts in the field. After hearing about the so-called Unstoppable Hulk, he wanted to see if his prison could hold him. He saw it as a win-win situation where he could test his prison and prove to the ninjas that he had control over them. Therefore, his true goal was not punishment or a test for his prison, but rather a demonstration that, as the country's leader, he had the authority to imprison him if he so desired. In other words, he wanted to scare him and show the ninja village that their unstoppable giant isn't as unstoppable as they believe. But he miscalculated that the Hulk is not only unstoppable, but also the most unpredictable ninja's alter ego. Of course, by the time he reads the other reports, he will realize that his prison isn't as invincible as he thought it would be. According to the report, the giant isn't just a threat for simply existing, he's also a disaster for doing nothing, because anything you do to him will only hurt you tenfold, if not more. Because of this one incident, no matter how much you want to save it, it will be a costly setback, and the Fire Lord will only be held accountable. The Hulk may be gentle by nature, but by your everyday human standards, he is abnormal. Therefore, it is simply wrong to try to treat him like a normal human being in the first place. Although he is mentally human, his physical strength is beyond superhuman, he is literally a kid with superhuman strength. By the time he has read all the reports, he will realize that his prison is beyond saving. After hours of reading those reports, the urgent order to release him was sent to the fire prison, and they were happy to get rid of him. In a way, sending him to prison is just asking for trouble, it's like sending a child to a paper house full of fragile glass sculptures. Even for a docile child, something would break eventually. Naturally, Konoha was also informed, but he was expelled before the message reached the ninja village. The Hokage and the ninjas can understand why, but the Sandaime couldn't comprehend why it took them so long. Unfortunately, he won't be able to solve that mystery because the Fire Lord won't acknowledge his failure, and the prison won't discuss how he almost destroyed their facilities. The Hokage and his Jonin sensei can easily fix that by taking Naruto to Ichiraku for all the ramen he can eat. Fortunately, he maintained his composure and prevented his alter self from consuming all the delicious ramen. Our green friend, on the other hand, didn't really care and returned to his regular activities.